Let's make planting this year's garden a lot easier with the Planter app. This app is packed full of features. It has companion and combative planting, which are indicated by green and red circles. It has a simple drag and drop interface. It has 80 plus plants and thousands of varieties. All the info is needed to grow veggies, including when to start seeds, transplant, and harvest, the ability to create custom plants and varieties, a growing guide with in-depth articles to supplement the quick info in the app, not to mention that you can view it and use it both on your PC and on your mobile device, so you can always be planting your garden on the go. This app is used in my garden year-round to plan the upcoming seasons, reference the last year's seasons so I know when to rotate, and it also helps me to learn more about companion planting using the visual cues. When you create your garden, it's going to be based on the dimensions, and each block is going to be a square foot. I've had a lot of fun using this app, and the Planter app, which is spelled Planter, is available in your app store on both Google and Apple. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and plan your garden, and use the link below to get a discount on the Planter app. Have you decided what method gardening you're using? Have you even tried to read about it? And let me guess, it's probably confusing. Well, we're going to give the argument today for a traditional garden right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Somebody called the police. Somebody stole Batavia's bell, damn it.
It's under my stack of 2022 mail, junk mail, no less. Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, we I see a lot of things out there in the world about different methods of gardening and stuff like that, and it makes my head swim. I don't know about you. Does it make your head swim?
On the one hand, it's like I want to be accurate in kind of the way that we depict what we're doing. But then on the other hand, it's kind of like accurate to whom, and on what day of the week, because, there seems to always be a change.
Oh, you and I are so different, because I could care less how I describe my gardening out there. It's just gardening, right? I can't tell you how many comments I get or emails about, have you tried such and such method or this method or that method? And then I go look into it and I'm like, it's basically the same method that's been used for many, many, many years with just like a tweak to it. And then somebody put their name on it, and it's super confusing. So I think it's a worthy topic, especially as we come into spring. And speaking of spring, why don't we spring right up to Patreon and sign up or give us a donation to help keep this show on the road? We've gotten a couple donations, and I really appreciate everybody. Thank you. You're keeping the show going. So with that being said, we need to... do you know of any methods off the top of your head? There's so many methods, I can't even pronounce some of them.
Yeah, I almost feel like let's cover off on what we're not going to talk about, right?
Yeah.
So I think a good example, like hydroponics, like that's not traditional, right? Period.
Well, that's a different kind of gardening, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. But would you ever consider that traditional? I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't. But no. So I just to help us, I Googled different gardening methods, and hydroponics is like top on, way high on the list. Now, this being said, let's get this out of the way. We are not talking bad about any type of gardening or method. Okay, so hydroponics, neither one of us dabble in that at all. I know people have done it and it's great, but yes, there's a complication to it, right?
Yeah. So my simple response would have been, we're not poo-pooing on it. And I actually do have one of those kind of like small kind of kits or whatever that I just haven't. Like, I feel like I have to read 20 books on it before I actually start doing it, which of course I don't. It's year 2. So that's, something. So I'll probably be trying it at some point during the off season. Not this off season though.
So, there's basic stuff like container gardening, raised beds, in ground. Like, that's not really what we're focusing on here. It's stuff like Back to Eden. I can't even think of
permaculture.
Permaculture. It starts with an H.
The
one.
Hugo.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's
that
the one
thing
I can't
is.
say.
Whether or not it's accurate, where you're layering things, I've read before I ever knew that word of the lasagna method when it comes to building a bed out. So in my mind, again, whether it's right or wrong, I connect those two. But I mean, I'm also looking at it like that's a way to kind of manage from one point until you get to the point where you're ready to plant. I'm more interested in kind of the general techniques you're using throughout your garden, your garden experience, right? So.
Well, I think. Go ahead.
It almost feels like there's a medium for some of these, like the container gardening, kind of the H garden, which I'm not even going to try again to pronounce it. That's the method of setting it up. Right. But then vertical gardening is, again, a method of, the way that the structure of your garden looks. Right. That's not what I'm focusing on when I think about traditional gardening. It's everything else.
Hugelkultur.
Good job, buddy.
Yeah, I got it pulled up right here. I had to phonetically sound it out. So, and I mean, there's benefits to every single one. Like the H one. I'm looking at it, and it's like, the scrap wood goes in and all that stuff, and then you can build your beds on top of that, which is great. But I think the problem that I find in a lot of this is people fixate on it. You know what I mean? They fixate on, what method are you using? Well, I don't really have a method. I'm just gardening, like I might do a little bit of lasagna stuff for a little while, and then I may do the H for a minute or something to kind of do something. I do a little bit in container. Back to Eden, you do some of that stuff. I mean, so it's like you mix all of them. Someone's like, what style of garden do you do? It's really hard to kind of just narrow it down, you know what I mean? And I think it pins you into this hole if you get fixated on a certain style of gardening, you know what I mean?
I don't know if I've ever had anyone directly ask me what type of gardening or style of gardener are you. I do think it comes out in some of the other ways that people ask questions, and I feel like people can absolutely get fixated on it. There are absolutely container garden posses, right? They are like, they keep it real about what they do. Hey,
look, I'm with you.
So we know
and you're right on the edge.
Yeah. They know that exists. However, I think that a lot of people kind of try to align themselves with something they feel like is successful. Yeah. So, and then once you kind of go all in, for those that do, on one of these methods, it's hard to kind of see the rest.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things require some investment as well. Even if you think about something as simple as container gardening, which I wouldn't consider traditional. Yep, I said it. I
don't think it's traditional either.
Yeah, I think it's clearly, because I do a lot of it. It's a great way to garden, but it's not traditional. Like, if I really kind of pulled it bare bones, it would absolutely be rows of food.
Right.
But our traditional, your traditional, my traditional, I think has evolved a little bit beyond that.
Well, I mean, it's like on this list I'm looking at, they've got hanging gardens, right? So, and I remember years and years ago, this was like 2010 or something, I was watching something, and somebody was getting ready for the apocalypse, and they had a small post stamp lot in their yard, and within that they had this crazy hanging garden, and they were producing massive amounts of food. But I bring that up because there was a purpose for it. You know what I mean? It wasn't just do it just to do it. They didn't have a lot of space, so they were creating space in which to grow these. Like, they were doing I'm gonna butcher this Trombochino squash or whatever. Isn't that the really long squash?
Well, no, I'm not sure if I heard it.
It's like 3-4 feet long or something. And so they were growing them in there, but it was creating it was a solution to a problem that they had. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then same with raised beds. So raised beds are a solution to a problem, generally speaking. I mean, a lot of people are under the assumption that the topsoil that's in your yard is just no good to grow, when, I mean, the trees are growing in it just fine. So why are we feeling the need to create this other space to do it? You know what I mean? And I raised bed garden. I always have.
Yeah, I have as well. Well, no, not always. Probably for 7 or 8 years I did not. But remember the show-stopping flower display that I have in my front yard, my street side flower bed.
Oh, that was so last year. I don't remember now.
Yeah, right. Well, wait, it's coming. Probably about a dozen times a year at various points, I get the question of kind of, what are you doing? Like, how do you produce this? And the funnier thing is, it probably has the crappiest of crappy compared to the kind of curated soil. And I never add compost to it. I basically dump soil in, right? It's like, I had to, everything that I pulled up from my, that had kind of composted down, and I'm using that word lightly, the wood chips, as they broke down, I basically needed a space to dump them. And so I dumped them in that bed. And it's just basically been a spot where I've put things over the years. It probably it's the space that I spend the least time watering. And again, these are different than your vegetables, but things thrive in those spaces. Have I had some plants that have failed? A couple, but I've had far more failures in all of my methods of gardening with vegetables and fruits and herbs than I have in that flower bed. I do think that patience is a key driver as to the style of gardening that we use. Yeah. So if you think back way before raised beds were a thing, if you had what you would consider bad soil, you worked on it year over year over year over year.
Yeah.
Patience.
Yeah, it takes and determination. To say that. So I'm gonna give you a determination story
and stick
right
to
quick.
To itness.
So if you know, and if you don't know, now you're gonna know that I've been trying to grow Brussels sprouts. This is my, I believe, 3rd or 4th year. It gets a little muddied in my head. And today I walk out there, and they're swelling up nice. So I look at them like, all right, any day now. And then I look on the other side of the plant, and now I have white mold growing on top of the plant. So I harvest it so I can get my Brussels sprouts and try to eliminate it from spreading. But it was that determination over years and years that got me to the point to where I could actually get a harvest. Now, look, is it a little ridiculous? Of course it's a little ridiculous. But it was just it was something that I wanted to do. Yeah. And it was something that I was determined to figure out, but patience was king. And I mean, look, it sucks. It's hard to fail year after year at something.
Yeah.
So, but we got it, and it was just that determination that kind of kept it going. And, I've got another list pulled up. Every time I Google different gardening techniques, or there's like a new, like top 18, there's a new, totally new 18 in there. So it's like square foot gardening, that's another method. And people that square foot garden, I think there might be somebody here amongst the two of us that does, are pretty hardcore about it. Are we not?
I think it's one of the most common methods I hear people reference.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever was like, everything in my garden has to be set at a square foot. I just like the structure. I like kind of the look of it, the view. I create grids in a lot of my beds, but I don't necessarily follow like 2 plants go into this square foot. I think it creates the structure that I need kind of just by eyesight, So I wouldn't say I'm hardcore about it.
But there are people out there that like containers. They're just like, this is how we do it, and we're going to do it this way. And I've tried it before, and so it didn't work great for me. But I can use aspects of it throughout my garden as well. So you mend and blend these different styles, But
it kind of goes back to the idea of how much time do you want to spend on a thing. So I think, what was it, the first year you talked about square foot gardening, and it was like you put either too few or too many plants, and it's like, oh yeah, I didn't read the book, or I didn't look at that particular recommendation, and you weren't satisfied with it, and then you're like, oh, I was supposed to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And so I think our desire to chase a thing, because sometimes you've been chasing Brussels sprouts, it clearly is what drives us to figure out if it really, really works for us. Tomatillos are a great example. I bought a new package of tomatillo seeds this year because my favorite salsa, well, the Mexican sauce recipe from the Bald Book that you shared with me is my favorite salsa from a red salsa standpoint. But salsa verde is my hands down favorite salsa, and I've been trying to make it, and I have like the worst time at it. And I want to grow tomatillos to do it, but tomatillos are kind of finicky, the plant. And it's like, well, shoot, how many jars do I really need of salsa verde?
Yeah.
Like, do I really, really love it that much? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, and I think as I was thinking as you were talking about that, about my square foot gardening method, it was all about the pruning. So there was a lot of pruning involved in it that I wasn't really feeling. So, but that allowed me to say, okay, if I can put in this bed 4 tomato plants, let me put 3 in. You know what I mean? And then give it's the room that it needs. And that's worked out for me in the past. No-till gardening is another one that is huge. People talk about it all the time. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception about it. So are you prepared for me to say this?
I'm pausing because I'm thinking to myself, like, if I had a box for traditional and not, like, if we look at traditional as in what most people have commonly done, and let's just talk about, maybe 1 or 2 generations. I don't know if I want to go back further than that. I'm trying to digest whether or not, is it more, maybe not traditional or not, maybe it's more natural to not till versus to till. Although traditionally we have, farmers and things and gardeners, home gardeners have tilled. And again, I'm going back a generation or so. So yeah, I had to kind of work that through in my head, but go on. Yes, I'm prepared for you.
I mean, if you think about it, food has been grown by the act of tilling for many, many years. And we all grew up on food that was in farms and gardens that have been tilled. The whole thing about no-till is you still scratch the surface. You know what I mean? Like, you're still turning it up, but you're not doing that real deep till. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that just total flip. And I mean, it's hard to say. Like, when you look at somebody and they're doing a no-till and it looks amazing, it's like, okay, well, what else is going on behind the scenes? Are they fertilizing more than you? Are they adding more compost more than you? The whole microbes argument is really hard because it's something that you can't see. You know what I mean? So it's like you want to preserve all of the microorganisms that are inside of your garden. And I do agree that, if you do a deep till and you flip all that stuff over, that you are in fact going to do some damage. But at the same time, we know that tilling has been an effective method for many, many, many years, and farms had been grown for generations on the same land that was tilled for years. So I'm not giving an argument of like, oh, it's great, but it's not. But what I'm saying is, I would hesitate to start it and then get so fixated on not tilling that you actually don't do anything but dig a small hole in your garden to drop your plant in. You know what I mean? Like, I think there needs to be a little bit of mixing, but you can borrow from it. You can borrow these practices from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some people that feel like they've done the research and they're firm believers on one method or another. I think that while we commonly refer to back in the day, I think that just with live gardening and otherwise, we realize that some things that were done in the past, we've since learned. When you know better, you do better. Right. So you welcome you can welcome change. Now, I think a part of what you and I, which, there's a tinge of that social media gardening into it, where something is painted to be the monster. right? And because of that, you keep on hearing it. Once you search, you Google or YouTube something, you guess what's going to happen? You're going to start seeing more of that video, more of that article and so on in your feed. And so then it starts to feed into you like, oh yeah, tilling is bad, and whether it is or not, I'm undecided. But that doesn't mean that it should drive a change in your garden. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the hard part, I think, because we have so much information coming to us in so many different ways, and we're always trying to fix a thing,
Right.
And it's easy to get wrapped up around the axle about some of this.
It is. And it's the same argument of like organic versus synthetic gardening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, are you totally organic? Are you, do you use synthetic fertilizers or chemicals?
Yeah.
I've often stated, and I will state again, like, I do not judge on that. That's a personal preference. I believe in organic gardening with a synthetic intervention as needed. So if there was something that was just like bad going on, like, you got to take care of it. You know what I mean? Because there's no point. I mean, if we want to bring up like your tomato debacle from last year, if
I'd rather not, but okay.
Yeah, well, we're going to rehash it for a second. But if there was a synthetic method to treat that, would you do it versus not being able to grow in that space for years?
I'm not sure, to be quite frank. Based on the space I have today, if this was, and it's hard for me to even go back to say when I had a smaller space, because back then I wasn't growing as many tomatoes. I believe that if I had some synthetic option to that I knew would have fixed tomatoes last year, I would absolutely did it.
Yeah.
I think that, now I've accepted kind of you need to, it's not, the issue is it's not like it's a forever fix. At least I don't want it to be for me. I don't want to continue to apply the thing over and over and over again because I'm stuck on growing as many tomatoes as I was growing in that particular space.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things too where you think like, okay, it's going to be multiple treatments no matter if it's organic or synthetic. Like there's never going to be a one treatment thing, but a lot of times these treatments will take care of it and then move on. You know what I mean? And you may have to apply, the beginning of the year or something like that. A lot of times that's I say that with a grain of salt, but it could work that way. Like for those white mold, for instance, that I was reading about it. I went through, it's in every garden bed, almost every garden bed. So it is spread to an extent.
You're telling me that it's in every one of your garden beds?
Yeah, in my garden beds.
Okay.
Yeah, it has spread to an extent. Now, there's a couple options that I can do. I can treat it. If I can find a way to treat it, I can pull the soil out and replace it. I can plant in a different method. I can rotate. There's a lot of different options to do before I need to jump into that. Now, when it comes into the heart of the season, and if I'm getting this mold every single time, you damn skippy, I'm going to do something a little different. You know what I mean? I'm going to have to step it up a little bit and, throw a little bit of synthetic on there and let our scientific advancements take over for a little bit. So, but it's all these different methods again that just, if you are fixated on it, it can become a hindrance because if you only want to do organic and then you can't find an organic solution, are you just going to let your garden die? If you need to till your soil to some extent, but you believe so hard and deep that you cannot till your soil, are you going to let compaction take over in your garden so that you cannot grow? You know what I mean? And you're just going to have to do it very slowly.
Well, I mean, I think, but is that the minority, like the extreme? The extreme person, like leaning all the way in, like, never adjusting. Do you feel like, I don't feel like those are the majority of gardeners. I
feel like, and I'm going to talk about my own personal experience. I can't talk for anybody else. I think it comes in waves. You know what I mean? I think you may learn about something new and then you'll be like, this is what I want to do. And then it's like, well, no, hold up. This didn't work great. So let me go back to the drawing board a little bit more. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think it's a lot like that. instead of just like, no, this is the only way and this is going to be the way forever. Like, I'm going to hydroponic garden forever, no matter what. You know, I'm just using that as an example. So I think there's a little bit of both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I laughed a little bit as I asked the question because you
tried to set me up.
No, it's like, then I put the question back to myself. So I asked whether the majority were like that. And I still don't believe the majority are. But then as I thought to myself just quickly, I can be stubborn.
Yeah.
So if I look at that and say there's some things like where it may not be one of the methods we've already talked about, like, oh, I can't get past doing this. I keep on trying it. Maybe I'm not even having success with it. I keep on trying, this particular method. There are things that I do in my garden that I've struggled with year over year, and I keep on doing it, thinking I'll make one more tweak and that'll be it. And then there are things I don't do, as a gardener that, I've been stubborn about. So the things that I continue to do over and over again, and we've talked about this because you keep on beating me up. No, I joke. Is, what I choose to grow in containers. A great example would be potatoes and the lack of success that I feel like I've had with them. Something that and then you switch over to something that I have avoided doing, and boy, does it continue to bite me. And that is, consistent crop rotation. Go back to the episode where I stood on my soapbox and said, never! I don't know if I was that extreme, but I was probably pretty close.
Yeah, you're pretty close. Because I did say something to you privately about that when everything went down. But
I don't know if I believe that, but okay.
Yeah. But I mean, you're exactly right. And so one thing that we haven't brought up about at all, and I've actually had a couple questions about too, is straw bale gardening, like growing in straw bales. For the record, I do not purposely grow anything in straw bales, but I do know and believe that it can work just fine.
I follow a gardener that does some like straw bale, like sweet potatoes. And from my view, it looks like he's pretty successful at it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go out there right now. I leave straw sitting outside. And when it, how it comes baled with the rope on it.
I think I
have
do.
one.
Yeah.
It's got rope on it right now. If I cut the bale right now and stick my hand in there, I guarantee you it's about 100 degrees inside because it's composting inside of itself. I've taken it open and I've showed it online before and stuff like that, how there's like mycelium growing in it. The seeds from the straw bale germinate in it. So it's like, it definitely works. It holds moisture. It decomposes. It does everything. But do I want to have my whole garden set up in straw bales? Like, no, you know what I mean? But I think there's a specific time and place to use it. So it's, and I just go back, and I've always been this way of like, how did my grandfather grow and how did his grandfather grow and the people before that? And then when I hear about these new methods, I definitely look into all of them, but there's something in each one of them that I'm just like, I don't think so. And then the Back to Eden garden, for example, do you know what this is?
I feel like and this is where, isn't it primarily driven by the use of wood chips? Well, maybe not. No, I don't know.
It's funny you say that because a lot of them are, like the H1 is driven by that. So yeah, you lay fresh wood chips down every couple of years to break down, and then you'll get that perfect balance, and then the compost and stuff like that. So for me, that does not work. Okay. I saw another person online who grows in the South, same problems I had. And the problem is you put this stuff down and we get fire ants that just get in it and build nests and grow. And don't nobody want to have that walking around with that. Not to mention, we all know that the first year that the wood chips start to break down, it does absorb the nitrogen out of the soil. So you've got to replace it. Now, once it gets going and you do it every couple of years, it's fine. But that first year can be kind of tough. You know what I mean? So, there's the big benefit to it is mulch. Yep. If you break it down, that's all it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for over the years, going back to the, when we were originally doing the early episodes of this podcast, I was a fan of wood chips. And I went from like, oh, I'm going to use them as a part of kind of walkways to I'm going to use them as mulch for my garden beds. And I would continue to use them as mulch for my garden beds, which I do not do now, if I didn't want to feel the need to amend my garden beds by adding things like additional soil, adding things like compost. The wood chips don't break down fast enough from the ones I'm using in my garden bed. So then I ended up scraping up wood chips, which is just a pain in the butt. Then you have kind of the invasion of the roly-polies. So I transitioned, I think, 1 or 2 garden seasons ago to using leaves, which I've had much more success with. But I love the idea of, using wood chips in other places, but it's definitely not kind of back to Eden style. There's something about the need to try something new, and I'm not talking about a new vegetable that you're planting, continually, right? Like, what's it saying? Like, let well enough alone, right? So on one hand, there's if you continue to stay stagnant, and if it's viewed as being stagnant, then you don't have an opportunity to grow, no pun intended. But then there's if you're always changing a thing, you're always changing a thing. And do you really even have an opportunity to determine if there's true success in the thing?
Yeah. I mean, because these things take years to see these successes of them. So I just want to, can I do a sidebar real quick?
Of course.
When I Googled Back to Eden so I could get it right, there's a question that came up in frequent, it's like, how Google will give you like top questions or whatever. And one of them is, can I water my plants at 2 p.m.? Yes, you can. End of story. Okay. Don't even Google it. Yes, you can. You have my permission. So, we did a whole episode about that, but,
was it connected to Back to Eden gardening or?
Look, I have no idea.
Okay.
This is Google. You can't.
Okay.
You can't. We just can't work on that. So, but it's one of those things that, the Back to Eden, is the number one reference, and no-till gardening is the number one references that I get about style of gardening to do. And I tried for a year, and when I noticed that I was just having major issues, I pulled all of them up. And you know what I did with all my wood chips? I put them right in my flower beds. Years later, it's starting to break down. I need to replenish and all that stuff. So it definitely does work to an extent, but guess what's in my flower beds as well? Fire ants.
Yeah, that's sucky. It's actually I don't know if I've ever seen fire ants in my garden. And
come down here. I'll hook you up.
Yeah, it may only be a matter of time. But I say that to say it reminds me of kind of different environments yielding different issues and sometimes different successes, right?
Well, what a great segue, Batavia. I love it. I love it. So that's exactly right. A lot of times when you hear about these different methods and stuff like that, I think it's a good idea to go back and look at where they came from and then look at the climate in which they came from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if something, and I believe the Back to Eden, I'm not going to put myself on the record totally, but I'm going to say it out loud. I think it was in a cooler, wetter environment is where it was birthed. I don't know. So if you think about it that way and then put it here where it's hotter and drier, when we get those dry days, that's where the ants will come and then they'll take over. But also what happens when it's dry is those wood chips don't break down as fast. So then you're starting to get a slower process in that. You know what I mean? And the wood chips in the garden is a hot topic.
Hot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have as much kind of direct access to, like, how exactly did you garden when and for what back when, and then for what reasons, right? Because my thought is a lot of the methods, I'm using that term loosely, were just based on access, right? You use what you had, you did with what you could, versus, again, we can have so many things shipped to us. We can, do different methods. Like, again, I could get free wood chips, and it goes back to me for me. It goes back to just because you can, should you?
Right. Yeah, and I mean that's a good point, because these methods, a lot of times people will get wind of them, and then we try to kind of go out of our way to make it happen. Mm-hmm. You know, like you have access to wood chips for free. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't have that. So if I was to do that, you know, that's a huge investment on my part. Mm-hmm. But what do I have that's cheap and available to me? I have straw. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that's what I use. I use straw. You know, if you don't have these available items, like I would not go out of my way, because there's probably a reason why you don't have this stuff available to you.
It's interesting. And I'm just the opposite. Like that I am aware of, I don't have a lot of access to straw. Like I remember the one time I bought it, and had it shipped, it was super expensive. I can get it from like my local home improvement stores, and there's some, depending on who you are, there's some question around, you know, is it really safe for your garden? And I've probably ignored the potential concerns or issues around it and just said it'll be fine. And so far it has been fine. I like, you know, kind of use what is, from a resource perspective, is available to you at, you know, in most cases, little to no cost. Anytime you talk about raised beds, which I don't know if you could even consider that traditional gardening, to be frank. When you think about raised beds, you're almost always adding some soil in.
Oh, yeah.
Know? And so that alone, if you look at what that expense is, and most people have to pay some amount of money for that soil, you know.
Yeah, for me, so traditional gardening for me is in-ground gardening, plain and simple. Mm-hmm. You dig up a plot, make some rows, stick it in the ground, bada bing, bada boom, you got yourself a garden. So I think any adjustment above that can, you know, takes you out of that traditional gardening realm. Now, that being said, I think if you take that out of it and you say, okay, well, let's just say raised gardens or traditional gardening, then you can go into like your fertilization methods and your mulches, mm-hmm. and then all these different things that you do. And then you can kind of add and build from there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to be said about what additives and stuff you put into the garden during the process of the year that make it a little bit more complicated. Because another thing look, gardening ain't easy. It's a complicated thing to kind of get your head wrapped around. Now, luckily it's not, you know, it gets easier over time to an extent, but there's always a wrench that gets thrown in. Mm-hmm. Every year something happens. And so as we learn and we grow in it, it does become easier. But then when we switch things up and, you know, you start adding different things and you're like, oh, well, that didn't work. Well, you've wasted a year by doing that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I would say if I had to give a piece of advice to a brand new gardener about this, and they came to me and said, how do I start a garden? Or, you know, how should I garden? I would tell them, look at some history books and see how people did back in the day and go for it. You know what I mean? Like, don't go crazy getting down the ring and Google and stuff like that, because you can get in the weeds quick.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd send them down that path. I'm not sure what the path is. I feel like there's...
You would send them down the H path. Whatever.
No. No, I just think that... I don't know if I completed my thought earlier around... You're like, when we know better, we do better. The old way isn't always the best way. I think there's some significant components about the old way. You know, we sometimes say things like, you know, they grew food for, you know, eons. You know, what could be wrong with it? Well, there's a lot of stuff we used to do. You know,
yeah.
Even decades ago that we just. The majority of people sign on to ain't the way anymore. And I'm speaking more globally than just the gardening. So I think that there's much more access to current information that can be viewed as a simple path to take. And I'm not sure where that is besides the internet. I definitely think that there's something to be said about, you know, doing a quick scan of community gardens, meaning like, do you have a community garden near you, and can you talk to some folks there, because that kind of nips a couple of things in the bud. Your local area, people that have been doing a thing for an amount of time, so they can advise on what does well, what doesn't do well, troubles that they run into. Some of the ways, like the structures of those garden spaces are that way because it's a community space. So there is that kind of asterisk around it. But generally speaking, I think it's a good, like, physical place to start.
Damn, my phone hadn't rang in like 2 days, and now I get on the podcast and it's just constantly going off. It's driving me crazy. And I didn't mute it. My bad, everybody. Yeah, I don't think it matters in the method in which you plant the garden. I think it matters most in how you maintain it and what happens the next years. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think there's a weight on each of those things. If you start off with your garden, whether you're planting in ground or creating a raised bed, and it's on a slope and you have some drainage issues, like, you're going to be up creek, Yeah. So, I think, again, those generally, I think maybe are the exception for people. I think that, digging up your grass or going to a dirt patch in your garden or your backyard and putting a plant in could lead to some issues. So I do think the kind of upfront work matters. I think that most all of the methods that we've talked about when it comes to, like, setting up a garden, I think they all can be successful. I think there's probably some nuance in if you're in Hawaii versus, Alabama versus Chicago. Maybe there's a slight difference, with what method may be a bit more successful. But, the world is yours, man. I think that's going back to your point, like, put them on a wall, throw a dart at it, man. Like, don't get caught up around that.
Well, let me ask you this. What made you go to a raised bed?
I first went to a raised bed because I wanted to grow food beyond the 30 by 4 foot space in my backyard. And at that point, the only place I had was, in my mind, my patio, and that was concrete. And I just didn't want to put dirt on my concrete. So I had to kind of enclose it. And that led me to a raised bed. Now, another version of that question is, or another answer to that question is, after growing in ground for years and years, why did I put raised beds on top of that space? Right. And that answer is primarily aesthetic. And then also the first version of the cage baby I wanted to build, and that really needed some structure. Someone just asked me recently, how did I get the wood post into the ground? When some people do that with, like, concrete, I didn't. I basically had a raised bed built, and then the wood basically is connected to that, which reminds me I need to go back and answer that question. Maybe you're listening. There's your answer. Maybe not.
There it is. Yeah, I started doing raised beds early on because I wanted to help with weed control. Mm-hmm. That was my big thing. I wanted to help with weed control. And then originally it was I would have, like, full control over the soil that was in there. But then as I grew and learned more, I learned that that wasn't the best idea. That probably has been one of the big hindrances by me, is because I do have that control of that soil. It allows me to mess up more as far as, like, nutrients and stuff like that, because there's not as much access. If you plant in ground, you got 3 miles until you get to, bedrock or whatever. So,
let me answer that question a third time in a third way. So the front yard garden. Hey. So the front yard garden was all grass.
Yeah.
And then I dug that grass up. And I could have created rows that I planted in, right? So why not? I had already been on the, like, raised beds. Like, I like them. I like working in them. I like the structure of it. It's this defined space. I also was on the, let's fast track this thing and get some good soil in, right? Yep. Which I could have added to just, again, once I dug up the grass, could have just added to that soil. But primarily the space is in the front yard, and it goes back to aesthetics for me. I wanted something that looked a little bit more neat. That's not what it is right now, people. Like, please don't come and look at my space right now. It's nothing but neat. But in hindsight, if I had to do it over again, I would do it the same way. The only caveat is because they're raised beds, it doesn't give me the room to move things around as much as I like to.
Right.
You know, if it was rows or something even a little bit more low key, I could like rearrange some things like I love to do.
Yeah. And what about containers? Why did you start doing more and more containers?
And last note on that, and for the raised beds in the front yard, and of course, if there was a downside to it, in addition to not being able to rearrange my garden space like I want, clearly cost, right? You know, so that's the asterisk around if there's a con. Containers came in between all of the raised beds. And it was, again, trying to expand my garden space without digging up things. So containers really took off before I got to, you don't need that grass in the front yard. So in ground, raised beds on the patio. I need more space. Insert some containers. I need more space. Insert more containers. I need more space. Dig up your front yard. That's my story.
Yeah, I needed I needed more space, and I wanted stuff that was readily accessible to me. It's like I could walk out of my back door and grab it within 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So that's why I gravitated towards light container garden. I've never had a giant container garden, and I don't ever plan to. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but it's also within the past 2 years kind of grown a little bit because I wanted to expand without having too much of a responsibility of expanding it. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense. Like I didn't want to be married to something because ultimately I could just dump the pot out and then move on, you know?
Yeah, container gardening definitely makes, I feel like gardening in general, and you'll hear this kind of almost tagline, more accessible to people. Yeah. The one thing I rarely hear and then the next beat when it comes to like container gardening is, I always look at your garden and say, I get why you limit it just from a watering perspective. Yeah. It's no matter where you are, it's harder to keep plants watered, in containers, period. And so the hotter the space is for the longer period of time, it creates more and more of a challenge. It doesn't mean you can't overcome it. We've seen gardeners in Texas do, in 100 plus degrees, Arizona, 100 plus degrees, and they manage it. But I don't know if I'd have like 60 plus containers if I lived in a place that was as hot as some of those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one thing about container gardens too, I just got a really good stretch. Felt good.
Kudos to them while you're stretching.
Yeah. One of the things about, having container gardens and stuff like that is, man, they get big quick. I don't hardly ever see anybody with a handful of if they have a container garden, a handful of containers, they get 50, 60 containers. It goes in deep.
Yeah.
So, which is pretty cool. I like that. I like the passion behind it. But if you ever say anything bad about it, the container garden crew comes at you hard. So.
Yeah, there's a witness protection program for those that spoke bad about container gardeners.
Well, we don't want anybody to be upset. And one way that we don't get upset is we feed people. And when we grow our food, we feed people. So let's do something. Let's do the recipe of the day. All right. Have I ever given my black-eyed pea recipe? Do you know?
I think you've given a black-eyed pea recipe. It depends on which one.
I only have one, so never mind. No, I'll give you a soup recipe then. So we do a chicken, air quote, chicken noodle soup, which obviously you can use whatever you want to get your chicken. Mm-hmm. It's 6 cups of water. And then if you use the chicken cubes, it's 6 chicken cubes in there. A chicken breast, if you want to use that. We actually don't put anything in there. We just use mushrooms instead of that. So it gives a nice little beef to it. Mm-hmm. Noodles, salt, pepper. And then what I did last time is I threw some spicy mustard in there. Boy, oh boy, was that good. I'm telling you, I'm hooked on the spicy mustard situation. But it was really good. And then the key ingredient for it is about a teaspoon of cumin that goes behind it. So, and these winter days, it will warm you up. And we do a lot of things. We'll do rice sometimes. We'll do noodles. We've done stars. We've done alphabet stuff, you know. All that is good things, but it's really easy, and if you put some kind of green in there, then you kind of beef it up a little bit. Well, I don't want to use the word beef because there's no beef in it. You kind of soup it up a little bit, and it gives it a little bit more staying power in your stomach. So quick and easy. Takes about 30 minutes to cook from scratch. Not bad.
That's the key. Wait, so are these canned beans?
Which of my beans? No, there ain't no black eyed peas. I changed. I said I was getting chicken noodle soup recipe.
Oh, okay.
You was half listening
to
it.
That's
okay.
Listening.
That's okay. Mm-hmm. I don't listen to you every time you give the recipe.
I can see it in your face.
But yeah, chicken noodle soup, super easy.
Okay.
That's one of our favorite recipes.
Now I have to go back and listen on the replay to make sure I get the recipe down, which is what I would normally do.
When my grandfather at one point, he gave me his, he was a big cook, and he gave me a recipe book for soups. It's called 365 Soups. That's it.
Oh, okay.
And there was all kinds, and there's like on the second page, and I was like, damn, I can't even get past the second page. There's some nasty ass soups in there too, though. There's a cold onion soup in there. No, sir. So, but yeah, that'll get you going.
We're still in soup season too, though. So
yeah, we have not had a very cold winter, so I have not been big on the soup kick this year.
Yeah, we're back down to 0 degrees as a low. And I don't know. I think maybe
Celsius or Fahrenheit.
Fahrenheit. Thank you. I can't remember if I was telling you this or not, or even if it's on the episode. Forgive the repeating of it. But this is like a few days ago. My neighbor sent me a text like, hey, I haven't seen any movement over there. Just making sure you're okay. And I'm just like, once we get into the 30s as a high, you'll see a little bit more movement.
Yeah.
And then embarrassingly enough, a different neighbor shovels with her snowplow our walkways, like the public walkway. So that snow is clear. And I just hadn't gotten out to shovel like my front yard space. So my poor mail person, the delivery person, it's only like about 2 inches, but it still is 2 inches. So anyway, that I think compounded the, are you okay over there? Yeah. So yeah, it's still cold. I'm still.
Have y'all gotten a lot of snow?
No, I mean, all in all, I think we've had maybe 3 times, like 3 snow events, going back to November, December, January, leading into February. And the most I've gotten, it feels like, is maybe 3 or 4 inches,
That's
in
nothing.
any of those events. No, nothing. I mean, we've seen, of course, like many have, I think it was maybe 2011 or something, where the snow was up to my garage doorknob.
Yeah, no. Before I left New England the last year, we had like 10 feet of snow in 1 year. It was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I know if you live in a northern climate and you get a lot of snow, you wipe your butt with 3 inches of snow. That's nothing.
Yeah. It's like, hold my beer, yeah.
Yeah, hold my beer. Now, for me, the first time I was in New Hampshire, I was visiting who is now my wife, and they were calling for like 6 inches of snow. Mm-hmm. Now I'm from North Carolina, so I'm up there and I'm like, oh man, we got to go get something to eat. We got to, oh my gosh. And she's like, no, let's go watch the movie. I'm like, what you talking about? Let's go watch a movie. And we're driving around. I'm like, damn, I was like, nothing stops for the snow. It was shocking to me. So yeah.
And we, if there's an ask, let's just be kind to those folks that, if a city shuts down when there's snow or super icy conditions, any of that inclement weather. I used to make fun of them when I was like a mean girl. No, yep, I'm calling you a mean girl or a mean guy if you do it. It's just they're not built for it. Those cities aren't built for it. Their infrastructure is not built for it.
We have one snowplow for 2 counties. And so if they even say snow, they shut the schools down. Mm-hmm. And I mean, It is a dick move, I will be honest, because I'll say something on like YouTube or something. You don't even know anything about snow. I'm like, hold up, man. I'm like, you don't get it. You can't buy a snow shovel. Mm-hmm, you can't buy salt for your driveway. Mm-hmm. You can't get sand. There's nobody, like, when it snows here, that's it. You are on your own, Jack. There is nobody coming to help you.
So I've visited a number of places, but I don't normally travel as much in the winter, and I'm born and raised in Chicago. And so in my mind, it's kind of like, all right, you're replacing, streets every year, patching holes, every year based on, all of the salt that they're putting down, and, pothole spraying is for everyone, right? Years and years and years ago, a guy I work with who was in Georgia at the time, he talked about they had like some ice scare. It was the beginning of weather shifting, in my view. They had some ice scare, and it took him like 2.5 hours to get home. And then his wife was putting down like bath towels on the driveway to help him walk up the driveway, Yep. And so it's like, I get it. It's tough.
Now, I will tell you, when I was a kid, we got a blizzard here. It was just shy of what a real blizzard is. But we got like, I'm going to say it's like a foot or 18 inches of snow. I'm not lying when I say the city was totally shut down for 2 weeks. And people were like breaking in the stores to get food at that point. Like nobody could get down the road. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
But anyways, so in summary of all of this, I would say if you're going to do a gardening method, just be free about it, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, go through and pick what you like, pick what you don't like, and don't get hung up on the name of it. Just, you know what you should call it? This is my gardening method.
This turned into like the Woodstock episode, like in the last 60 seconds. Just be free, man.
Just be free. Here, hold my joint. Be free.
Free yourself, yeah.
Yeah, free yourself. Ain't nobody got time for that. But look, everybody, check out the Planter app. I know it's that time of year and everybody's getting ready to, if they're not planting their garden, they're getting ready to. There's a link down below. Help get you a discount. Become a patron. Give us a donation. Help us out. Patrons get another episode every month. So come check us out. And also, if you've made it this far into the episode, you are officially invited to our Facebook group. What's the name of it, Batavia?
Backyard Community Garden.
There you go. So come check us out.
Going to my phone to check to make sure that's the correct name. And while I do that, check out my brother Ben and his spring garden plan. So it's over on YouTube, Sandy Bottom Homestead. And the episode is titled My Spring Garden Plan. Spend some time with him while I watch the snow outside. He's like literally in his garden with his plan too. So
yeah, it's kind of it was confusing to say the least, but that it used the Planter app in that video, so there was like a dual purpose to it. All right, everybody. Well, I'm glad we learned to grew for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck.
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.